Who are these people who are Agni Yogis? Who are they contemporarily? Who are they historically? In order to look out to the world or look at ourselves for what are the qualities of an Agni Yogi, we just look at our life. And if we look at Nicholas Roerich, we find that he was an artist. The man produced over 6,000 canvases. We would look at artistry as part of being an Agni Yogi. That does not mean that we have to be a painter or a sculptor or an architect. But it does mean that art, beauty, culture, a way of seeing and perceiving the world that is beautiful, that wants to see harmony, perceives the unanimity, the one taste, if you're familiar with the Buddhist term, perceives that. Equally so as an artist and as an Agni Yogi, our joyful responsibility is to recognize inequality, be that in a color palette and how things contrast. Van Gogh, of course, used contrasting colors so vividly and so brilliantly. So this idea of complementarity, of putting things together, of harmonizing that which seems to be possibly at first quite disparate, that's the artist, and that's an Agni Yogi. He was a philosopher. He engaged philosophy from a very young age and entertained for quite some time, actually having 3 interests in his life. For him, philosophy and archaeology went hand in hand. His first line of study as a youth was in archaeology. And of course, music, as a musician, but anyone of middle or higher income bracket and stature in the culture, in the Russian culture, and in most westernized cultures at the time, learned music. But as a philosopher, he looked at life for truth. We know that that's what philosophy means, the love of truth, capital T, love of Sophia. So we would look for that within an Agni Yogi. We would look for wide-mindedness, for possibly out-of-the-box thinking, but not necessarily so. We would look for the thought to not be limited, however, by cultural boxes, by historical boxes, by somebody else's box. We would look within the Agni Yogi for a freedom within the mind. And so again, how beauty included unifying, complementing, finding a synthesis within shape and form, we would look for that within the mind, within the Agni Yogi. And so a philosophical approach to life, if you will. He was an adventurer. Again, I'm sure that most of you know that he and his wife traveled extensively through the Himalayas, through the Mongolian steppe. He lived, I think it's at least the last 20 years of his life in Mongolia, and many of the paintings that are done of the Himalayas are done through Mongolia. As an adventurer, we would look to that quality for an Agni Yogi. Again, does that mean that we are in planes and boats and bushwhacking through the bush? No, it doesn't mean that necessarily. He did it that way, and his wife too. We would look for endurance, the endurance of an adventurer. We would look for the stamina of the heart of an adventurer. And we would look for daring. We would look for the edge, and a person who enjoys the edge and knows that there lies the door. The edge is the door. The precipice is the door. And learning to fly is the way of the Agni Yogi, jumping off the cliff in other words. the statesman, the diplomat, of course, again. Culture was imperative to him, as were the arts, as was philosophy. And so he sought through most of his life to protect art, to bring countries together, to support the cultures that were inherent and alive and thriving in the various places and locations that they were, especially subcultures as he encountered them within Asia, Northern Asia, within the Himalayan region, within Europe. And during the war, he sought to protect art. He sought to protect the artists, and he sought to protect peace. And so we have the banner of peace. This then, for an Agni Yogi, is to bless and hold as sacred all beings, all cultures, all ways of demonstrating a culture, the gift that a culture is to the world. It is to understand that philosophically, to understand that historically, to understand that the future of the world is determined by and dependent upon that which is already here. If we undo or put into disregard any piece of the totality of the fabric of life and the fabric of culture, human existence, then the whole fabric starts to fray. This is the attitude and the understanding of an Agni Yogi. Creator, yes, he created institutions, he created arts, he was just unstoppable. You don't paint 6,000 canvases and not be a creator. He, of course, was schooled and got a PhD or the doctorate in law. He was a doctor of law. And, of course, this served him well, not as a lawyer per se, but served him well the international law that he had to constantly navigate. Elena Roerich, of course, was his wife, and she was the telepath who took down the Agni Yoga books. And that is the right word for it, telepath. She was a musician herself, an artist. She certainly was more than a staunch supporter of her husband and all of the world endeavors that he engaged. She too was right beside him in all the adventures through the Altai, etc. There was no moss growing on her stone, that's for sure. So she too was an Agni